We are joined on this episode by a screenwriter, a producer, and a film historian. He is on the acquisitions team and does special features production for Vinegar Syndrome, a film restoration and distribution company that has preserved and released hundreds of genre features, several of which we've already talked about, blind purchasing, and continue to buy. He is Brad Henderson. Brad, thank you so much for joining us on the program here, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited you're here because I think I've told you this before, Brad, but I'm super jealous of your job. I think what you do is super cool at Vinegar Syndrome. So
get that a lot. Yeah.
Sean and I are definitely going to nerd out here with you a bit. But how we usually like to get started is just by asking how you got into filmmaking and genre film specifically. Like, was there a person that introduced you, or a movie, a piece of pop culture that just got you hooked?
So I'll just start off by saying, yes, I'm here on behalf of myself and VS, but I'm not here to represent Vinegar Syndrome, and anything I say, of course, is my own opinion and doesn't reflect Vinegar Syndrome views. However, to answer your question, I was introduced to film by my mother. I guess my fondest memory of when I was younger was when I was 4 years old. I remember watching Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. And in October of 1988, and I have video of this that I've put on Twitter before, is that my parents got me, and my birthday was in November. So I was technically, I guess, 3.5 at that time, my parents got me a Nightmare on Elm Street mask and glove and hat. And I was very aware who it was. And, I would put on the mask and I would do the rhyme that they would do in the film. And that's how I was raised. I was raised on horror films at that age, and not many cartoons. We lived up in the mountains and we were kind of isolated. So my mom was a big horror fan and she watched a lot of this stuff, and she didn't want to watch it alone. My dad worked a lot as far as at a pest control business and a Roto-Rooter company. And he was out on the road a lot doing work. So we would watch movies together, and that was kind of our thing, and it has been our thing still to this day. And I got really into it. Very young age, like I said, and I continued to watch movies and got really obsessed with it even when I was around 10 or 11. We got our first computer, a compact computer it was, and I had a disc called the All Movie Guide. And that was before IMDb was really around, or getting online and looking up what we can today. And I would just search that endlessly and click links and read about the films and try to find them at the video store. We had multiple mom and pop places around. And it just kind of got worse and worse, if you want to put it that way, to the point where I started, doing tape trades, and my mom would take me to certain events in Tampa and Orlando, just kind of bootleg conventions, because a lot of times some of these films, they were incredibly hard to find at this time. Now we're talking, I was probably 12, I would say, was my first one. So that would have been 1996. That this was happening. So around that time, there were no DVDs. There was still VHS, but a lot of films were only distributed in certain areas of the U.S. And so the only way to get some of that stuff was through bootlegs. I remember reading about Aunt Titson at a very young age, because he was arrested for some of this stuff. And, I became friends with Sage Stallone online, and we would talk about movies when I was in my teens. We met on a forum and stuff like that. So it's always been a big part of my life, and I would watch anything I could get my hands on, and still to this day continues. I'm completely obsessed still, never has left me. And I've had day jobs to, put food on the table, but my passion was always film, whether it was writing and stuff like that. As far as inspirations, a big thing for me was John Carpenter, still to this day. He's my idol. I was introduced to Halloween at a very, very young age. And still Halloween 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I just, even though he didn't direct that, it was Rick Rosenthal, but still he was, involved in writing the script and whatnot. And that got me really into filmmaking. I wanted to do that. And as far as wanting to be behind, that's what inspired me mainly to be a writer. I wanted to write movies. And it wasn't in probably till I was like maybe 14, I saw The Shining. And then I knew I wanted to be behind the camera, just because if you can present something so beautiful, but so sinister at the same time, that really appealed to me. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to shoot something beautiful, but also terrify people at the same time. And I started working a day job. And then I got really back in the industry. I got into the industry actually when I started going to film festivals. And I started going to film festivals in about, I would say, 2009. Going to Fantastic Fest was a big experience. I met a lot of filmmakers and I met a lot of friends and made connections. And I tried to network because I wanted to write. I wanted to sell a script. That was my idea. I guess anybody that's a writer thinks they're just going to sell a script. It's super easy. But I went and I made connections, watched movies. I loved it because I got to watch movies and hang out with people. And I met some cool and creative people, other writers. But all in all, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of independent filmmakers that had day jobs that made this film on the side. And then they're here for the festival for all the glory. And then, guess what? On Monday, they head back and they bartend at the bar that they've been working at for 5 years. And I realized I wasn't alone. I was, thinking that everybody lives in this fucking Hollywood and this glorious mansion and, they're in LA, but no, they're in, Woburn, Massachusetts, making some, film with their friends, and they're here for the weekend. And then they go back and they made some money and they continue with their job. And eventually in a few years, they'll find some funding for their other script that they have. And it really inspired me. But also, like I said, living in a small town myself and thinking you needed to make a movie in Hollywood, I realized I wasn't alone. And so I started writing again, making connections. But again, film like history and stuff was always a big passion. So I continued, to watch that, study, read anything I could and about movies, watch as many movies I could. And then, eventually Vinegar Syndrome came along because movies started coming out again more frequently. I would say about 8-10 years ago, there was, Screen Factory started up. All these like kind of boutique labels started putting stuff out again, and felt like you're watching it for the first time again, which was nice. With these restorations and whatnot, new presentations, it felt like watching it. I also had I have a daughter. And she was around 6 or 7 when some of this stuff was coming out, and she was able to watch it. And I would kind of live vicariously through her watching these movies, seeing her experience with it. I know you can probably relate to this, Becky, quite a bit. And, it's a beautiful feeling when you can watch something with a child, but it feels like you're watching it for the first time again. But yeah, that's another story and another time. But Vinegar Syndrome came along later.
Yeah, we definitely want to get into how you started Vinegar Syndrome, but I just wanted to first say, I can totally relate to kind of your story and upbringing. I grew up in a rural area myself in Washington State, and we only had 3 channels, from an antenna, and they didn't come in very well. So movies were our thing, and we just collected. I think we had thousands of VHS tapes at one point, just because that was what we did as a family together. So a lot of what you were saying sparked a lot of memories for me, and that was family time for us. So totally see how that kind of helped sort of develop what would later become your career. Was it at kind of those sort of swap meet type things, or when your mom was taking you to places where you could go get old VHS tapes? Was that kind of how you started getting into weird old movies? Not just
Yes.
These horror movies that we're, we all know and love, but some of the weirder things that you would find?
Yeah. No, it really started because we lived in Pennsylvania for a while before we moved to Florida. And my mom would hook up 2 VCRs and she would record all the movies we would rent at a local video store. But the local video store had your, normal stuff, all the Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, anything with maybe was at theaters everything was at theaters at that time, but it was more or less your popular stuff. And then we moved to Florida, and we had a couple video stores that were kind of the mom and pop places. We had a place called Video Hut, and which might have been a big chain. I'm not 100% sure, but we had a Video Hut here. There was also a very smaller place that was run by a family. And then we had Blockbuster, and I rented everything. I mean, not just horror. At that time, everything through the action section, comedy section, horror section. That was kind of like my main stuff. I got into dramas, and art films later on, musicals, whatnot. That was in my later years. But I got to a point where I saw everything. And we would spend summers. Another cool part of this story is that we would spend summers in Canton, Ohio, where I was born, because my grandmothers lived there at the time. And they had a place called Video Time that was there. Video Time was massive as far as the store was concerned. And I'm not exaggerating. I remember this very vividly, is that walking into Video Time, one, it was a huge store, but their horror section was, we're talking about a place that was probably, I would say, at least 3,000 square feet as a video store. And I would say along 3 of those walls was horror. It wrapped around the store. It was such an awesome experience. And my grandmother always said, as soon as I entered the Video Time, I would head right. I would just turn right, because that's where the Z started. And I would just walk around and look. And that's where a big part of my education, quote unquote, education came from, because we would spend summers in Ohio, and my parents, like I said, we would spend a month or 2 there. And my grandmother was very, very much into movies, and she didn't gamble. My parents did. And they would go out with other family members to go on gambling trips, bingo all the time, stuff like that. And I was with my grandmother, and we would go every few days, and she would let me rent 3 to 4 movies. And, I'd watch a couple with her. She would rent like a drama or like a erotic film, not like a porno, but she would, rent an erotic thriller. I remember watching After Dark, My Sweet with my grandmother, and I was very uncomfortable. Or Two Moon Junction was another one, which was very, very inappropriate for my age, but I still watched it with her. And we would watch stuff like that. Any of the Zalman King movies she would really like. And then at night, I would, after she went to bed, I would, I had a pull-out couch that I would stay downstairs, and I would watch sometimes 2-3 movies a night, and then rewatch them if I really liked them, the following night before we went back to the video store. And so again, my mom would do all this stuff. And eventually when I hit my, around 12 or 13, I realized I'm out of stuff, and I had this all movie guide, and I forget how I found out about it. And I realized that there is this kind of place in Tampa, like this small little convention center that had, just this VHS swap. And there wasn't a ton of people there. It was very nerdy people. Very smelly at the time. I remember the smell. It was mildew, cigarettes, body odor. And, any video store you went in at that time, there was mildew because between people smoking and then, just the smell of the carpet. I'll never forget that smell though. And then you become kind of wanting it again, which is weird. But my mom would take me, and you're right. That's where I got into the more obscure stuff, because I realized that, not all movies had big productions. There was, shot on video movies. There was stuff shot on 8mm. There was, movies that were put together for $15, and movies that weren't on All Movie Guide, and foreign films. Like I remember getting an Olaf Ettenbach movie when I was like 13, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And it blew my mind. Yeah. And then I just got more and more into it. I wanted more and more. And probably around 14, 15, that's when especially when I started working at the video store. When I was like 16, I was hired at Blockbuster when I was 16, and I worked with a bunch of film nerds, like really hardcore snobby people. And everybody knew me as, Brad, that's the horror guy. Like he knows all. And I was like, yeah, I do. And I wore it across my chest and shit. And then I asked them one time, I'll never forget, they were talking about some movies and they had some DVDs. And I said, hey, what do you have there? And he looks at me, he's like, oh, you wouldn't know this. And I felt like it hurt my feelings, like really bad. And he had the film, The Kid Stays in the Picture. And he also had a Suzuki movie. I can't remember. I think it was Tokyo Drifter, maybe. And he said, you wouldn't know what these are. These are like art house, these are actual, this is cinema. And I was like, yeah, I watch movies, man. Like, he was like, this isn't the stuff you watch. I was like, you motherfucker. And I got really mad and really sad by that. And then I made it a point to, you know what, I'm going to watch everything and I'm going to know more than you eventually one day. And I went to Virgin Megastore and like the following weekend, and I bought like Suzuki's like Pistol Opera, and the Kino had some like Shark Skinned Man and the Peach Chip Girl, and I started buying these like Japanese movies and some of these like foreign films. I was like, I'm just gonna watch I made a determination. I'm gonna watch every movie ever made. That was kind of like my thing that I wanted to do, because I felt like an outcast at that point. Like, we already feel like an outcast in general. And then sometimes you feel like an outcast when you're in the movie world because there's so much gatekeeping. And then like when you think that all this stuff, then you're being left out of this other world of, these art house films or whatever it may be. It's just all fucking movies. It's all cinema. And I just made a point. So if anybody talks about anything, I would know at least something. And that really kind of drove me to do that. And I wanted to know even more. And just all kind of took off from there. I just always said to myself, I'm never going to say no to anything. And I still live by that. I even sometimes get a little annoyed when people are like, oh, I'm going to skip that. I was like, I don't want to skip that. I don't want to watch it for myself, make my own opinion. There are things that I like. I do have a list of stuff I want to see. I'm going to pick this movie over this movie because this, appeals to me more. But I'm not going to write off something, even if it's a Lifetime Christmas movie about some bakers. Shit, I'll watch it eventually if I'm bored. But that's just how it is, and I kind of live by that still to this day.
We'll segue that because you answered a few of our follow-ups in it. So when you finally you said you had some day jobs, but you still kept the passion for not just filmmaking, but calling yourself a film historian. I think you can easily do based on what you've told us. So how does that work when you end up getting a job with Vinegar Syndrome? Because you have to take a written test to show what a historian you are? Because that's not something necessarily on the resume. Like, I had a job as a film historian, or did you actually have some type of gig prior to Vinegar that led you to it?
No, I make that up myself. So the reason why I say that, and it's just probably to kind of like toot my own horn and give myself credit that doesn't need to be credited, but I feel that I am. And this is the reason why is, my day job was working as a pharmacy manager, pharmacy technician manager at the hospital. And I worked that was my thing. I was a manager for pharmacy technicians and was a buyer, and I was basically the pharmacy director's like right-hand man in that sense for numerous years at the hospital. But film was always my passion. When I say that, I took film classes, I briefly in college, like a couple courses. And then I did anything I could get my hands on as far as reading material. When I was younger, I would read it. Buying any book or reading any book, reading any articles online, reading about the movie as much as I possibly could. And then when I was in my teens, the internet was a different place, as far as people and how people communicated. It was not as toxic as it was between blogs and websites. There was ways to contact filmmakers, and that's what I did. I contacted numerous filmmakers through their websites and blogs, and they were on some of these horror sites, and you got to talk to them, and I would just ask them endless questions and learn about the filmmaking process, learn about their process, learn about the movie, learn certain details, and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that comes from, is just endless reading about stuff and searching and learning those types of things.
So how did that end up evolving into your current position at Vinegar Syndrome? Like, alluding to Sean's question, there wasn't like, they didn't give you like a test that says like, how well do you know movies? Like, was it through networking at film festivals and, maybe some of your filmmaking endeavors?
Yeah. So what it is through the years of reading about numerous movies and studying those things and researching endlessly to, Citizen Kane to a Canadian 8mm like science craze, like, which I tweeted about today, which I always kind of joke about, anything. So in return, to answer your question, when the boutique label Vinegar Syndrome kind of came out, I was kind of just, searching the internet for movies, and I came across Night Train to Terror on Amazon. And I saw Blu-ray of it. And I was like, who the fuck is crazy enough to put Night Train to Terror on Blu-ray? And I was like, this is a bootleg, obviously. And so I went to it and I saw the company, and then I typed the company into Google and I saw, oh man. And this is when they very, very first started. I was like, man, this is like my wheelhouse. This is the stuff that I grew up on. And so I was writing for a couple websites at the time with reviews of new movies and Blu-rays and stuff like that. And so I reached out to Vinegar Syndrome and I said, I would like to talk about your stuff, on this, kind of columns I have and Blu-ray reviews. And they were just starting out. So this was new to them, not like it is today, and where everybody has a blog, everybody's writing about movies. And they were like, yeah, sure. So they sent me some stuff, and there was some hardcore pornography and whatnot. And I was like, this is amazing. This stuff's so good. This is what I grew up on. And now like I get to upgrade from my VHS tapes and everything. And I just kind of established a relationship with James. And, at the time I didn't know his name was James, but that's who I was talking to, was James Neurath, who's, still at Vinegar Syndrome. And he's like, cool, man. Yeah, just, we'll send you some stuff. You write about it, whatnot. And I posted online, and they would send me the next, month of whatever they had. And we just became kind of friends. And I talked them into coming to some conventions here in Florida, and they did, and got to meet them in person, and just kind of became like a fanboy, super fan of them. And just kept doing that for a lengthy period of time. And that's when Exploitation TV came out, which they started their streaming service that's no longer around. And they said, we want you to be a beta tester for this new thing that we're doing. And I said, sure. So they said, just get on there and just watch whatever you can. So I would get on there and just, click and watch movies that they haven't released yet, or just to kind of test it out, see how it works, the connection wise and whatnot. And then I saw that they had The Severed Arm and House of the Dead on there. And this is like way, way before these came out on Blu-ray. And I said, holy shit, you guys have The Severed Arm and House of the Dead out there. I was like, are you guys going to do those? Because if you do, those are like the two, like there's a few movies that like made me who I am. Those are two of them. I know those are weird movies to choose, but it's just two movies I was introduced as a child, and I really loved. I said, if you guys do anything with that, like I've kind of researched The Severed Arm extensively, know a lot about that production, and even spoke to some of the filmmakers that even aren't around today. And I said, House of the Dead, I'm a huge fan of. And they said, yeah, if we end up doing those, yeah, you could help with whatever, just to kind of humor me at the time. And I just kind of mentioned that. And then, here and there, I was like, hey, if you guys need something, I can do this. I can do that. And I think at the time, they were thinking, oh, he's just offering help. We got this covered, this type of thing. Or maybe they get offered a lot of help, and they were just, like I said, trying to humor me and, just politely saying, okay, yeah, sure. So I didn't wasn't annoying about it. I didn't press them, but I would mention it here and there. And I would just say, hey, I have extensive knowledge of this stuff. I could help out in situations. And they knew I collected a lot of tapes. And that was my thing. I tried to collect as much as possible. And I had a lot of rare movies that were lost, movies that aren't even on IMDb. And they knew this in conversations I had with them. And so The Undertaker was coming out. So Brandon calls me, who I started talking to eventually as well. He said, hey, so we, have this movie, The Undertaker, that we're releasing, and we scan the negative, and the director's watching it, and he says that there's parts missing. And he said, parts really aren't missing on the negative because that's what they sourced from. We don't know why the negative's cut. And, the movie was actually never released on VHS. It was released in the theater and then disappeared. The only time it ever had a release prior to the Blu-ray that Vinegar Syndrome did was a DVD by Code Red, but it was the cut version because they used that negative. So they said, do you have this copy of, The Undertaker? And I said, I don't, but I know people that do. So they said, okay, well, you've wanted to help out for so long. Here's your task. Find that footage. So I it took me a while to contact the editor, and he was looking through all his, tapes and reels and stuff, and he didn't have the footage. So ultimately, after months of doing this, we decided, well, let's just use an original tape of the bootlegs that came out around that time. So I hunted down a original bootleg of the movie, which was the best source we could, rather than using something online or whatever it may be, a digital copy. I mean, so we had the tape overnighted to Vinegar Syndrome. It was all this was last minute because it took months and months, and they got the footage and they were able to insert it back into the movie, which is the only known source of that footage. And they were like, oh shit, cool. You did it. Like, that's great. And then eventually, I said that I've contacted actors, producers, writers, directors through the years, people that are not in the limelight, that are not filmmakers anymore, that retired, 30 years ago. I still had a lot of contacts from people I looked up myself at the time. When I was younger, I would literally cold call people when I was like 15 and be like, hey, are you the director of this? And like, yeah. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm a fan. Will you talk to me? And a lot of people were welcoming to that. To kind of segue off to something real quick, I became really good friends with George Dugdale and Mark Ezra, the writers and creators of Slaughter High. And I wrote screenplays at the time, and Mark Ezra helped me develop one of my very first screenplays that I wrote. He gave me notes back. I was just 15, and he was trying to help me because he thought it was cool that I was inspired by his movie Slaughter High. That's and awesome. I was just a massive fan of it. And, he eventually sent me the script for Slaughter High 2 that never happened because, Simon Scudamore, killed himself. And he was like, here's this screenplay that we had that we were going to go in production, and it never happened. So I got to read the screenplay of Slaughter High 2. And, he just gave me notes. He's like, this is what studios are looking for right now. Let's see what, craft your story like this. And he became a friend of mine. And just, there was a lot of situations like that. So then when it came to where Vinegar Syndrome was maybe having some trouble finding somebody, they said, hey, do you know this person? I said, well, actually I do, or I know somebody that does. And so then I started putting Vinegar Syndrome in contact with certain producers or directors or writers, actors that I knew of. And so then I started kind of coordinating that at a producer level. And I got, special thanks credits and stuff like that. And then I think they were like, oh shit, Brad wasn't actually lying. He actually knows a lot of this stuff. And, just through conversations, and to answer your question in this long form, yeah, they, with me talking to them and having long discussions, they knew that I kind of knew what I was talking about. I wasn't just full of shit. Like I was, knew this, had this vast amount of, at the time, I was just thinking useless movie knowledge. But in return, it helped me get this job. I watched a lot of movies, and I knew a lot about a lot of crazy stuff, and, even rights and film material at times. And, eventually it just brought me on board. And I did special feature production because I have these connections with these actors and whatnot. And I'm pretty good at finding people. And then acquisitions just kind of came in because I had a couple, to jump back. I asked, at the time I was doing these things here and there, like finding people, like doing stuff for the Undertaker. And I said, hey, have you guys, what about this movie? And they were like, oh yeah, well, if you can find film material and, rights to movies, sure, good luck. Just to kind of humor me. Well, within a week, I had 5 movies to them and film material. And they were like, oh, we didn't expect you to have 5 movies of film material. That's crazy. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I like I said, I know, some of these people, I know the directors, I know that they have material. So, even before I was hired at Vinegar Syndrome, I brought them The Suckling, Flesh Eating Mothers, LA Wars, Splatter University. So I knew those rights, and I knew that they had material, and it all materialized in a contract and stuff, because I helped facilitate that. And they were like, oh shit, yeah, Brad actually did all this like in just a couple days. That's impressive, they thought. And eventually, one thing led to another, and then I got into acquisitions too, because I just kind of knew that stuff offhand.
That's
sorry for the long answer, but
no, it was the true answer, which is great. And it's awesome to hear how the persistence sort of paid off, when you're doing something you love and putting yourself out there a bit repeatedly, and actually showing up when the time came to kind of prove yourself. It worked out. So you mentioned, you do acquisitions as well as special features production. You're doing a lot of different things, like from tracking down rights and filmmakers to producing special features. What is an average day like in your role? Does such a thing exist, or is it just different every day?
So I usually answer this with there is a GIF of a guy washing his car, and he's got like the hose wrapped around him and like brushes, and he's falling around his car because he's got so much going on. Sometimes that's how I feel, because I'm I'm writing emails on the phone, watching movies, stuff like that. So it varies. Sometimes I focus on certain things at certain times, like if we have deadlines for because a big thing last year was the Beastmaster kind of documentary we made. So that came about because we were creating this, this new label, VSU. And, when we acquired the Beastmaster, I was like, well, this is a big move, do something big, do a bunch of interviews. And we had a lot, I had this long list of like 15 people. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to try to get all these people to do interviews. And it's like, well, good luck. Mark Singer, he might not do it. And I was like, well, can't release the movie if we don't have Mark Singer involved. Like, it's kind of stupid. Everybody's kind of like, what if we do like a doc style thing? And I was like, yeah, I think that sounds cool. It's different from just doing an interview, edit it, and put it on the disc. So I was like, well, let me see what I can do, So I started reaching out to everybody, and, that was a long process. So I really stuck to it every day of, working on, the Beastmaster saga, getting, Mark Singer involved, and Tanya Roberts. And I mean, we had anybody who was alive was part of the Beastmaster doc that actually had a story to tell. So I think we had like 15 interviews total. And then I had this crazy idea of like, the Beastmaster was a big movie. It was on television all the time. So there's got to be people like me that were heavily inspired by this movie. So then, one of my, Simon Barrett is a friend of mine. We were just talking, and he knew that, what I was doing. He's a big fan of Vinegar Syndrome and whatnot. And he was like, Adam Winter's like a huge, huge fan of the Beastmaster. I was like, oh, I wonder if we like interview like certain filmmakers about this stuff. I was like, that might be cool, and have like how this movie inspired them. And then, so, through just going to festivals and stuff, I remember that Joe Lynch was a huge fan, and Robert Cargill was a huge fan of the Beastmaster. So it's like, I reached out to them, and I was like, hey, you want to do something crazy and do an interview with us? And Joe became this kind of essential part of the storyline in this documentary that we made, along with, with Dawn, because Joe had a similar situation with Knights of Badassdom. So there's kind of this weird, like, linear storyline with him going through this like same experience, and having a movie stolen away from you, and have a cut that you really don't approve of. And yeah, it was just kind of endless on your days. To answer your question, like I just spent, day after day trying to organize interviews, writing questions, because I got to write questions for all this stuff too. I got to organize the interview, make sure the interview happens, make sure the interview gets uploaded, talk to the editor, make sure the editor knows what they're doing. They obviously, a good editor, which we mostly have wonderful editors. They have they actually tell the story, which I like. I don't really have to tell them what to do. I'm just like, this is kind of something I think we should focus on, a little bit directorial stuff, but mainly 90% in their hands. And then, making sure everything's done on time. So when you have your lineup for the year or 2 years, and sometimes movies are shuffled around, because of contractual obligations. Sometimes getting film material might be delayed. So we got to move a movie around. So a movie that I'm working on for the month of May, I'm in production. I have multiple interviews scheduled. I'm doing it like, oh, we're not going to get film material. Let's grab this movie from December that we're supposed to release and let's move it up to May. And now I got a new movie I got to focus on. So those things happen a lot. So that said, a lot of things are jumbled around sometimes. So I'm always on my toes. I always have a new project that I have to work on. I have, like I said, locate the people, talk to the people. We're dealing with movies mainly from the 70s and 80s. And, sometimes these smaller movies, people don't work in the industry anymore. Don Coscarelli is easy to find because he's still making movies. But, somebody that made a movie in their hometown and made one movie and now they're, a real estate agent, I got to find them, and sometimes that's hard, especially if they have the name like John Smith. So it could be a lengthy process. So each day is different, and then staying on top of all those releases that we're doing. And then I have this running spreadsheet of, I looked at it today and it's like, 400 movies of stuff that I've, any downtime, I try to research what happened to the rights, contact the producers, hopefully they have some type of proof that they own it. Do they have material then? That's the whole other thing, oh yeah, I have rights, but I don't know where the material is. Now we have to find material, or we find material, but we don't know who owns it. Various things like that happen. So it's just never ending. It's the same thing every day, but in different ways. But it's always exciting and it's never boring. And I love it.
We're positive that what Becky said, it sounds like a very envious position. And I can attest, I saw early guest of the show, a mutual friend of all of us, I believe, Tim Anderson, had Instagrammed a shot of the Beastmaster 4K he bought, and I bought it maybe 19.6 seconds later. I immediately was like, oh my God, I didn't even know about this release. I went to Vinegar Syndrome immediately and grabbed it. And it is gorgeous. And you've got me pumped now to watch the doc on it based on all the names you just said. You mentioned these challenges. Would you say the biggest challenge is always just a rights issue, or is it tracking it down, the license, or is it, finding the prints? Like what is the most constant headache for you, or most common headache maybe?
Just finding people, really, because that's where it all starts. I have to find people for interviews. I have to find people for rights. Film material is a little bit different. Joe usually handles a lot of that because he has an insane amount of knowledge. What happened to labs, where labs shut down, where do they move their stuff, that type of thing, but sometimes, it's always a different story. Sometimes it's like, film material is lost. Other times you contact the producer. They're like, oh yeah, I own the movie. And then it's like, you have film material. And it's like, yeah, it's in my garage. It's like, oh, that was very, very easy. Do you want to do a deal? Yeah, sure. And then other times it could be like 3 years while we're trying to find something. So it's always a different story. But I think the hardest part, to answer your question, is just finding people sometimes, because it can be a very lengthy process. Like I said, especially how they're named. It all depends on their name. If it's something unique and they're a registered voter, sometimes it's easy to find. Other times, sometimes people go by stage names a lot, and that's really difficult. People move, and also people die. And if they die, they got to find their kids. Was the movie left in the will to the children? Did the children even know about it? Did they throw the film elements away when they inherited, their father's stuff? And they were like, why do there's these big reels of film in our garage? Just toss them. Who cares? Not knowing that, this can exist.
Like a PI or a bounty hunter without the intimidation factor. Just people down all day.
Yeah, for the longest time in my bio in my email, I put headhunter because that's what I kind of thought I was doing in a way, just, hunting people down. But I would say that's the hardest part.
Are there any things about your job that surprise people? Like when you tell them about it, that they're like, oh, I would not have expected that to be part of what you do.
Yeah, I would say call up an actor and say, hey, give them the spiel. My name is, Brad Henderson. I work for a home video company called Vinegar Syndrome. We acquired the rights to so-and-so. And when we do so, we're restoring the film and we're re-releasing it on home video to audiences. And when we do so, we like to put as many special features and interviews, cast and crew members as we can. And that's why I'm reaching out to you. why the fuck are you doing that? Why are you releasing that movie? Or it's like, oh my God, how embarrassing. That's the normal reaction of, some of the movies we release. They're embarrassed. Some actors, some directors maybe aren't proud of their work because they went on to do better movies sometimes, or the actors did that one movie that they did and then they, did stuff that they really liked because this is a slice and dice movie where they don't know that there's an audience for it. It's always different. Sometimes they're very apprehensive. Sometimes, they're like, oh, why are you doing that? But then you tell them, I tell them, hey, there's a market for this type of thing. People love these types of things. And, being that I'm not just this hired gun to find people, I have a connection. I don't really fanboy out to them. But, when they're a little apprehensive of like, oh, why are you doing this? Be like, well, listen, I've been a fan of this movie since I was a kid. I grew up on this movie. And that I think and usually that's typically the truth. There's very few movies that we're releasing that I didn't watch when I was younger. I do have a connection with them. And, I tell them that. I tell them a little bit about my history and why we do this. And that really changes the perspective of these people. And it's not a lie to get them to do it. It's the truth. But I try not to be, quote unquote, unprofessional in that sense. But, sometimes, when you're putting these things together and, I see it from the beginning to the end. And they do the commentaries with me. They do the Zoom interviews with me. I write the questions. I'm in constant contact. So they know that it's more than just this, phone call like, hey, can you do this? Yeah, sure. Let's set it up. I'm like, I really want to do this. I love this movie. And, sometimes I ask crazy questions. Like one of my favorite things is when we did the martial law, double feature. I'm a huge fan of martial law. I was, when I was very first hired, I was like, I want to do these Cynthia Rothrock movies. She was like my babysitter when I was little. And I was like, I love martial law. So, we found the rights and the material. And so I was like, I can't wait to do these features. So I contacted who I know would be great, would be, the director and stunt coordinator, Jeff Pruitt, and, Steve Cohen, the director and producer of the movies. And so, of course, Cynthia. And I told Steve when we were doing the interviews, I said, I'm going to ask questions that kind of make fun of the movie in a way, but you have to understand it's like with a lot of respect. And, I love these movies. And he was like, yeah, I don't really understand what you're saying, but go ahead and shoot. So I asked him, I said, one of the questions, start off like introduce yourself. What inspired you to become a filmmaker? This type of thing. And I asked, I said, you ever wondered why, when you're writing a script for martial law, why everybody knows martial arts? It's like everybody they encounter, cops, villains, whatever, everybody knows karate. And he was like, I never really thought about that, but that's just, everybody knows karate. When we did the interview for the second one, asking questions about production, why was Chad McQueen replaced? Why is it not so much Cynthia's movie? Why was it this direction? And then I asked, why does everybody have ponytails? And he answered them like, genuinely, because he was understanding, like, I'm making fun in a way, but he was like, he's like, that's right. Everybody had ponytails. He's like, actually, when we were making that movie, I had a ponytail, just stuff like that. So, it's not just these run of the mill questions of what is your daddy? What does he do type thing. It was more or less, like really sometimes intricate questions, sometimes questions about production. Sometimes I ask, why is the movie like this? Sometimes, why is it shot like this? Because it doesn't like the rest of this movie doesn't feel like the first half. The tone's different. Did something happen during production? So they understand that I'm actually a fan and I've watched this movie and I've acknowledged these things. And when you do that, when you ask questions that maybe a normal person wouldn't answer because they are afraid of how, they don't want to offend somebody. I'm not offensive, but I do ask those questions, more intricate questions sometimes of like, did someone fuck up? It's like the end of martial law too. I said, did you run out of money? Because the movie just kind of ends. Billy Drago just like kills himself and the credits roll. And, he answers that, and it was just like, he appreciated that I took the time to really analyze the movie. And I try that with all those movies, all the questions that I write. So, with that, to answer your question, yeah, every day, like I'm writing, 20, 25 questions for each interview. Sometimes they're good answers, sometimes th're not, but I want to know. And that's up to the editor to take out the, stuff that's not very good. Because sometimes they're like, oh, I don't remember, or they might have a lackluster answer, which is fine. Sometimes these people made these movies 40 years ago and they did it because of a paycheck. Maybe they don't have a story to tell, and that's fine. And that's what I tell them. I was like, you don't have to answer stuff that you don't feel comfortable with. You don't have to force an answer because, sometimes you're very passionate about making movies. Sometimes I needed the money, and I did 10 movies back to back. Of course, you don't remember maybe what the set was like, or the morale on the set. That's fine. But that's part of what I do. I try to ask questions to find the more, what camera did you use? How much was, the stupid Q&A questions that are in fucking festivals. What was it like working with Christopher Walken?
We know those questions.
Yeah, it's so dumb. So I never ask what I don't ever think I've asked what the budget was on any interview because it's a relevant, dumb question. It's more like, what did you do with that money? Like, how long was your shoot? Did you go over budget because of this crazy effect, or was this person difficult where it, stretched out the production? Who knows? But anyways, yeah, I always try to, of course, sitting and reading about these films and reading anything I could when I was younger. I do have like this kind of crazy memory of reading about something that I heard and like, oh, I'm going to clarify this now. I'll ask a question that is a rumor and clarify it then. It's kind of, we did that with, even though it's not in the features, Dark Tower that we just released. It's a Freddie Francis movie, but Ken Wiederhorn is slapped his name's all over it, as a director. So I contacted Ken when we were doing the movie and I said, hey, I was curious, like your name's kind of all over Dark Tower, but it doesn't feel like your movie. And he's like, oh, it is? And I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, I didn't do anything like that. I wrote a spec script for it and that's it. I never set foot on set. I was like, you're credited as director. He's like, yeah, no, it's not. I didn't direct that movie. And I mean, he could be lying because it's a terrible movie, but I believe him. Yeah, he didn't set foot on set, but he's credited as director on that movie. And Freddie Francis too, but Freddie Francis directed the movie, not Ken Wiederhorn. And he didn't even write the script. He wrote a spec script. So like those types of things, I try to clear up and fix, and we can't, fix the billing block. But, when we write the description for the movie, I'm not going to say Ken Wiederhorn's, Dark Tower, just stuff like that, little things. I am probably just rambling at this point, but I'll shut up and you guys can ask questions.
You're good. You've referenced several killer releases already. I want to know if there maybe a release or two that you've helped usher through the label that you're maybe the most proud of, or
Spookies is probably my proudest moment, because that was a movie that I wanted to get into film distribution at one point in my life, and then I realized it was incredibly expensive, so I just stopped. But I always, everybody was asking Spookies, and I would see comments from other companies be like, "Oh, that's impossible. It's a rights issue." Like, oh, and so we get in our head like, "Oh, it's a rights issue." And I was like, "What is the rights issue?" I was like, what's going on with it? And it was like, oh, the rights issue is that no one can find the producer. And I'm like, well, that's not an issue. That's just legwork. I was like, I'm going to find him. And so I found him in London and talked to him, and he was like, yeah, sure. And we did a deal. And that was the whole debacle of why Spookies was never released, is that it wasn't a rights issue. It was literally just, we needed to find the producer. And, with the story of Michael Lee, it was a really rough time. His son died during production, and the production was a mess. And, the company, he was, Vipco, there's a documentary on the disc about that. And he just had a lot of trouble. It was a lot of troublesome. And, how the movie was, directed by numerous people because it kept on getting re-edited. It just had a troubled history. And, he just kind of disappeared. That was the issue. So that's kind of how that all unfolded. I mean, some of the films that I brought in, helped bring in, because I'm not doing anything. I couldn't do anything without Vinegar Syndrome. So I always try to make that clear, is that none of this would have been possible without that. But, Splatter University was one, helping facilitate The Severed Arm, which eventually came out, and House of the Dead, which I mainly did, special features on that, not so much finding rights and whatnot. But I mean, I had a blast doing Fade to Black because that was another one where this is like rights issues. And it was just a matter of just doing some legwork, and, when we did Fade to Black, it was great. We did a lot of special features on that, even with Linda Carriage, who disappeared from the limelight, ran away to Australia. Took me months and months to find her, but I did. And, it's just, I very much how I got the job with Vinegar Syndrome. I'm just very determined. And, I try not to be annoying, but I do try to push. And, I don't give up until I have an answer of yes or no. And that's what I want. I want an answer. I just don't. I think a lot of people, we try to do things, in life, and just not in this industry, but in life, things are hard, and we try and we try and we try and we try. And sometimes we try for too long and we just give up because it's hard. And I'm not one to do that. I just want to see things through because I want an answer. It may take me a while to get that answer, but I try not to give up. And I think, as Becky said, just being persistent on things. And that's what I do and try. And, exactly why we found Linda Carriage. So, who hasn't done an interview in since probably 20, 25 years, because she just disappeared. She wanted to raise her kid in the Blue Mountains of Australia, and that's it. And she's this very, very humble and very sweet woman, and I was happy to work with her on Fade to Black. But it's just being persistent on that stuff. But to answer your question, I'm proud of a lot of movies that we've released and a lot of features and a lot of interviews I'm very proud of that we got. Going back to Fade to Black, I was very nervous about contacting your Blondes because he's a pioneer. And it's like, what is he going to say? How is he going to act towards me? And it's like, this guy's talked about Halloween probably, enough to make a person go mad. And I was like, Mr. Yablons, would you like to talk about Fade to Black? And he was so generous and so nice and so thankful. He was very excited. And, you just don't know how people are going to react sometimes. Sometimes you do have nasty people. And it's fine. That's their own prerogative. But, it's really great when people are really into it. Especially like Dennis Christopher. I probably spoke to Dennis Christopher 20 times before we actually did the interview and commentary, because Dennis just wanted to talk about everything. And we kind of became friends. And that's another cool thing is sometimes these things, you hook up a shoot, you do it, it's done. You never hear from the person again. It's fine. Other times you kind of become friends with these people because they understand you're a fan and they appreciate that. It's still even when, I just text Dennis the other day because one of his films that he did in the 70s got a vinyl release as the soundtrack. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to him. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, can you send me the link? I need that immediately, And so I kept in contact with Dennis Christopher a little bit. Darcy DeMoss is another one because it was really funny. We did the interview with Darcy for Pale Blood, which I was a big fan of. And, I contacted Darcy on Facebook or something like that. And she was like, I'm going to be doing this. She's like, I'm doing this convention in Orlando. And I was like, oh, shit, really? And she's like, yeah, I'm doing this Jason Lives thing. And I was like, oh, I live in Lakeland. I live 45 minutes away. She's like, oh, yeah. She's like, totally. Just come in and hang out. And I was like, Darcy DeMoss wants me to hang out? I was like... I was obsessed with Darcy DeMoss when I was younger. This might be a little weird. So we go, because we're going to be at Spooky Empire anyway. So I went up to her and, she was signing. She's like, oh, hi. She's like, do you want an autograph? And I was like, no, my name's Brad. We talked on Facebook, just thinking oh yeah, how are you? And she stood up and she cheered and she was like, oh yeah. She's like, hey, put my sign down. I'm going to walk around with Brad. I was like, what? This is fucking crazy. So we just started talking. I was like, I'm actually a massive fan, and I was like, I even know that you're in the cheerleading movie, give me an F. And she's like, oh my God, no one's ever talked about that. She fucking does the Ducks cheer right in the middle of Spooky Empire for me. The whole fucking cheer. And I was like, that is crazy. I'm living the dream right now. And then Darcy's just this awesome lady who, I've kept in contact briefly here and there. It's just super sweet, very nice. And you get that every once in a while. For a little while, Mark Singer and I were texting each other Westerns to watch. which was awesome. Like Mark was really, really nice. And I thought, he's more high profile at the time and has a pretty big career. And how is he going to be? No, he's just a sweet guy. Like he's really nice, genuinely like, down to earth, very thankful for what we did. And, when he found out that I liked Westerns, we would talk about Westerns and I would recommend stuff to him and he would recommend stuff to me. Not like we're doing this constantly, but this was for a little bit. It was a lot of fun, and it just, you take that in sometimes, like, they don't think too much of it, but I do because I would watch these movies growing up and never in a million years I thought I would be, talking to some of these people and, somewhat making friendships with some, making friendships with others. And yeah, it's kind of surreal sometimes.
Yeah, I think that leads into another thought I had as I was, hearing you, talk about some of these stories of it, providing a way to connect with a variety of filmmakers. Maybe some of them aren't making movies anymore, but some of them might be. And just sort of the persistence. I think that's a really common thing we hear from filmmakers in all different kind of aspects of their roles is like, you got to be persistent. You got to, they say network, but you got to network with sincerity, right? Because you bond with other people over your love of something and kind of develop this network of people. I know you're also a screenwriter yourself. Do you think that some of your work for Vinegar Syndrome has helped your own screenwriting, filmmaking career outside of VS?
No, I don't think so. Because when I got the job for Vinegar Syndrome, a lot of that took the back seat. I have stuff written, but I'm not as trying as hard because I have this like huge career move. And, I don't feel like I have a job in a way. That's kind of how I feel about this. I'm very thankful for the job that I have with Vinegar Syndrome. It's literally the best thing to happen to me. One of the best things, top 3 ever in my life. And I'm very thankful for working for them. And every day it doesn't feel like I go to work. It just feels like I'm doing something I cherish and love. And one of my things that I love doing is showing people movies that I know they haven't seen. And now I get to do that on a mass scale sometimes of recommending movies and acquiring something and putting it out there and seeing people talk. Like I can't even tell you, every time I read a review of LA Wars, it's just amazing because no one really knew of that movie ahead of time. And it was a movie that I just knew about and I loved and I shared with a good friend of mine and had no idea how I was going to perform. The movie's weird. It's goofy. But when we released it, just the overwhelmingly like positive response on that was just crazy. Still to this day, I still see reviews like, oh my God, LA Wars, I wish there was more movies like this. And I'm like, there are. I was like, don't worry, we're trying. But to answer your question, no, not necessarily in that aspect. I do meet people and do make connections with certain producers that are still in the industry. And maybe in the future that could help me because I'm just, both of you know this, is that when you meet friends and meet people, that does open doors that you don't know exist just yet. And that's why I'm always tell people, and I've told this people numerous times, new people in the industry, I was like, do not treat anybody with disrespect in this industry. You are not better than anybody. You don't know more than this other person. It's always a learning experience. And if you fuck around with somebody and piss somebody off, you are going to meet them again in your life. And they are going to be able to interfere with something if they don't like you or they know that you're an asshole. Do not do that to people. And, that's why I always polite, meet people, become friends, because you don't know how they're going to help you out in the future. I've worked with a few producers that are still in the industry. Who knows? One day, they might be like, hey, you write screenplays, right? Yeah. Well, send me something. Let me read something. Who knows? That could even fucking happen. It's just, so nothing yet. Like I said, the screenwriting has kind of taken a back seat. I don't write as much. I come up with ideas all the time. But as far as writing something down, not so much anymore. But I still want to. It's just kind of finding the time because having a family, doing my job I work around the clock. I don't work like 9 to 5. I work from the time I get up to the time I go to bed, various parts, or watch a movie with a family, stuff like that. I got 3 dogs too, so my time is focused on a lot of stuff. But yeah, I mean, my big passion is still to make movies, and I still want to do that. And I've tried putting myself out there. I've had some close calls. I've had some things that I have done and, seemed like they were going to materialize, but obviously they didn't. But during that time, and that's the thing, is that maybe things don't work out in your favor of trying to make this movie with this company or make this movie with this person. You still meet people along the way. You're still making connections. And, I might take back what I said about helping me, because a fun story off the side that I just now thought about is that I was working at I was at Fantastic Fest with Vinegar Syndrome. And this guy comes up to me, and his name's Ben. And he said, hey, he's like, oh, these are like weird movies, right? And I'm like, yeah, because a lot of people don't know who we are. And he's like, you have like obscure stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like trying to figure out what this guy's getting at. He's like, my boss really loves horror films. He knows all about horror films. And he's like, do you think that you could give me 3 movies that he's never heard of? And I was like, possibly, but I need to know who your boss is. And he goes, he's like, my boss is Kevin Williamson. And I was like,
holy shit.
Man. I was like, Kevin Williamson, Scream was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a screenwriter. Is immediately what I told him. And he was like, he's like, awesome. So how much Kevin knows. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty intimidating, but I can do that. So I got 3 movies for him, and he bought them. And he's like, so you're a big fan, you like Kevin? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, here's my card. He's like, we're always looking for new material and new scripts and whatnot. He said, send me something one time. And I was like, what the fuck? So yeah, I somewhat have that contact and have spoken to Ben a couple times. Nothing's ever materialized, of course, but it's still that opportunity, that connection. And who knows, one day he may be in a meeting and they're like, hey, we're looking for this type of movie. Be like, oh shit, I remember reading this script from that, weird guy at that booth. So who knows? As I say, I always ask, what do you do? That's one thing that I always ask people, because you don't know who you're talking to. You're at these festivals, sometimes people are fans. Sometimes the fans actually have jobs in the industry, so always ask people what they do, because who knows, sometimes people will be like, hey, do you know someone here? And I'll be like, no, but I know this person who probably knows someone over there or that in this industry. Let me give them a call. And sure enough, there you go. So I'm always interested in what people do. And I always ask. It's part of networking. That's how you do it. Yep.
I think that's really good advice. It's funny. So my next question, Brad, was going to be about if you could give me like 3 recommendations for lesser known films that like a seasoned horror fan maybe wouldn't think of, that's from the Vinegar Syndrome catalog. But instead, I'm going to rephrase it. And if you remember, what are the 3 movies you recommended for Kevin Williamson?
I recommended Pledge Night, and I recommended The Telephone Book, which wasn't horror, but I think he would like, just because of his style of writing and, obviously being, a gay man in Hollywood writing horror. He obviously has this certain taste and certain kind of aura about him of things that he likes. And that's what I love about Kevin Williamson is that, he's very open about that stuff. So I thought a sexploitation comedy might be up his alley. So it was Pledge Night, and then I took a gamble with Nightmare Sisters, because I was like, he's probably seen this, but I'm going to go ahead and try it anyway, just because, the director, of course, and then, obviously having Brink Stevens and, Linnea Quigley and Michelle Bauer. And it's like, this is something that I think he would really, really like. So those are the 3.
Awesome. What would you say is the weirdest, like the most batshit crazy movie that you sell on Vinegar Syndrome?
Batshit crazy. And, people always say Raw Force, and Raw Force is weird and crazy. But if I had to pick something that I think is truly bizarre, is a porno that we released called Jungle Blue. I think that is a weird movie. and it is a little out there. And then also our box sets of the All Night at the Porno, which is like 12 hours of solid, like short films and lost films of pornography. There is a Bigfoot movie on there.
Oh.
Where a Bigfoot fucks these girls. And it is just the grimiest, grittiest, nasty thing I have seen in such a long time. So I can't remember the name of it, but it is like, you can see like the dirt on people, and that's like very unsanitary and dirty. Dirty sex is one thing, but when you're doing dirty sex, and that's a turn off. So there's that I find a little weird, but yeah, Jungle Blue. And then also something that I just think is just an odd twisted tale is another pornography that we've done called Marilyn and the Senator, which has a lot of weird twists and turns of the storyline. And you get to watch Bill Marigold eat a full cooked chicken that he sets on a mantle while getting a blowjob. And it is one of the grossest things I've ever seen, but also very, like, you just can't look away. So there's that too. With horror, it's hard for me to pick something that I think is off, because I watch so much that I think most of our stuff is pretty tame, to be honest with you. I've seen so many crazy fucking like shot on video movies that are super weird, and also kind of that real stuff like the August Underground movies and like Slaughtered Vomit Dolls and like the guinea pig stuff. That stuff's extreme. We don't release anything of that nature. So it's hard. Like, I think most of our stuff is pretty tame. It's honestly the pornos that I get weirded out by, because I don't know who they're actually intended for.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of that's the thing, is like, you have a sex film. That's fine. That's, put it on 42nd Street theaters in New York. It's going to get stuff. But who is actually playing a gorilla fucks people? Like, hey, get this. Let's get this in here. That's going to bring the crowd in. No, I don't think so. Even at that time. Who wants to see that? But anyways, yeah, that's the weird stuff I think we release.
Yep.
On a similar note, is there a film out there may be several in your brain here, that's never been available on DVD, Blu-ray, or even VHS maybe, that's like your white whale, maybe one that you'd like to see either found completely or given the special edition treatment by you guys or any boutique label? Yeah, no, I mean, there's I can't really speak titles on certain things because it's what we're trying to do. But I can speak on a couple. There's a movie that's getting released, actually, not by us. It's by a company called Media Blasters that I've been a fan of for a while. And it was Roberta Finlay directed it, and it's called Banned. And she hates the movie. It wasn't on IMDb for a while. It is now. But it was a lost movie that she did and she buried. And I first read about it with Zach Carlson's Destroy All Movies book. He talks about this movie, Banned, and he saw it. And I was like, what the fuck? What is this? So it's like this, punk rock band that goes into the studio to record an album, and it's haunted, and this, demon comes out of a toilet and possesses people. It's this really wild movie that, doesn't feel like a Roberta Finlay movie, but it's also weird that she doesn't like it, because she's done so much. She's done horror, she's done pornography. Basically, what hasn't Roberta Finlay did. So it was just really odd that she was really against this. And, I talked to Zach about it, and he said as soon as he brought it up to interview her for the movie, she hung up on him. And, eventually I saw it. I got a copy of it through a friend of a friend of a friend, and I loved it. And I was like, shit, this would be amazing. And eventually, Media Blasters worked out a deal, and they had material, and they're restoring the film. And it's this lost Roberta Finlay movie that's never been seen, never on VHS, never screened in theaters either. She tried to bury it from the get-go. So there's something like that. There's a movie that I talked about this not too long ago on Twitter, and it's a movie that I really like, but it's called Silent Death. And it had a VHS release in New Jersey. It was a local, like only just a few copies ever was made from the filmmaker. And I think it's very important that this film gets released. It is it's a slasher film that is kind of blaxploitation. It is blaxploitation. And that doesn't really exist as far as, other movies. And I got to talk about it. This movie may never come out.
as well, is that it has, the killer is a Black woman, and she's masked, and it's revealed she's a Black woman. I have seen a lot of movies. I have never seen a Black woman get revenge in a slasher film. So it's the first of its kind, as far as I know, unless somebody can name something else that listens to this show. But I think it's very important that gets released, and it's a lost movie. It's good luck finding it. There's certain circles that I go in that have access, and we trade movies like this. And that's something that I got to see it last year for the first time. And I was just blown away. I wouldn't say the movie's like amazing. Like it's this revelation as far as like put together. It's, it's a really low budget movie. It's a little sloppy in the editing. Its story is a little convoluted at times, but I think it's important because one, I don't think movies should disappear. Two, it does something different that still hasn't been done to this day. And I think that's important. But there's so many lost movies people just don't understand. It's so funny because every once in a while, like I'll get on Twitter and I'll say something and you get attacked because people just don't know these things. So they like feel like they're out of the loop. I'm like, yeah, this movie exists and it's not on IMDb. Oh, bullshit. I've never heard of it. Well, yeah, that's why it's lost. There's so many movies that are made and funded and edited and then never, ever seen by the public eye. Not a test screening, no nothing. There's hundreds and hundreds of movies like this. And I'm very much into lost movies. I will read so much and find stuff. Something I can talk about that I was part of. It's not out yet, but it will be coming out. I worked for Wild Eye Releasing for a little while, and I was trying to do kind of a shot on video label over there, which Rob eventually kind of did. He was releasing stuff slowly, but I remember reading about years ago, I read about this movie that these kids made in Hawaii, and they were like 15, and they screened this movie at a local festival. And I remembered that. So I tried tracking down this article that was in this like small town in Hawaii, this news article, and I found it. I got the names of the kids, and I contacted them. I never saw the movie. I just knew about it. And so I contacted the kids, and then of course grown adults now. I said, hey, did you guys, do so-and-so this movie? And they're like, yeah, we did that when we were like 16. I was like, oh, we're like, yeah, copies of it? And they're like, yeah, we think so. So they get this tape, right? And they send it to us. And, Rob gets the tape. It's covered in mold. It's like ruined, but salvageable. But you got to put money into it. We're like, do we put money into this thing that no one has ever seen? I'm like, yeah, go ahead, do it. I was like, if kids can make a movie, like a feature length movie at 16 years old, fucking let's try to rescue this thing because that's impressive. Grown adults can't make a movie. So it's done, right? And I get this like text like midnight or something. It's like, hey man, check your email. You got to see this shit. So like I get out of bed, right? I put in my contacts. I sit down on my computer and I hit play. And I just watched this amazingly glorious fucking shot on video movie that these kids made. Just don't understand how they did some of the shit they did. I was like, how does this look better than what people do today? Like these kids had zero money. Like their masks, like so basically it's an Evil Dead ripoff essentially. But there's a sequence where the kid is pulled through a floorboard, like laying on the ground. This hand reaches up through this, Necronomicon book and grabs his waist and then pulls him through this little hole, and his body bends, feet up, back touches basically his ankles, and this blood spurts up from the middle of the floor, and he's pulled down through the hole. I'm like, how the fuck did they do that? Like, these kids are 15 years old. How the fuck did they do that effect? And it looks real as shit. And I'm just like, my mind's blown. I'm like, how does this even exist? So we rescued this movie. And then, like I said, it's not out yet. I'll be sure to tell everybody when it is. But it's just this amazingly put together, super low budget movie by teenagers. Everybody's a teenager in this. The whole production was teenagers. And they made one of the bloodiest movies I've ever seen. And, it's cheap. obviously shot on video, and, everything, like their dollies are, skateboards, that type of thing. That's how they created this. And like, they have this scene where these two kids basically, with their powers, they lift themselves up and they fight like in midair, but they're on the shoulders of these, of these other kids, obviously, because they didn't have wires or anything, but it looks legit. And I'm like, man, how the fuck did they do this? Like, I'm a grown ass man and I wouldn't be able to put a production together like this. So that said, there's so many cool and creative movies out there that maybe the filmmakers didn't believe in, that movies are just lost. There's so much. And I love the, idea of a lost movie. I love it. And I try to track down everything. As soon as I make, and that's another thing, is that what I found out doing this, especially licensing movies from producers, the very first thing I asked is like, what else have you done? And I tell you what, it's so many times you'll find out, yeah, we did this other movie. It was never released. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And it's awesome, because it's an opportunity to do a lost movie. And I think that's the cool thing, is people just aren't aware. They think that everything's on IMDb and everything's available. And it's like, no, there's a whole universe out there of the lost movie, which is awesome.
And finally, what would you say to someone, and there are many people out there for various reasons, who may not see the value in physical media? What's the hard sell from Brad Henderson?
The hard sell on physical media is to me, it's not much of an argument, because streaming services are cool, but they're not forever. So if you don't actually have something in your hands, it doesn't really exist, which is a big thing. So so Vinegar Syndrome licensed the movie for 5 years, right? That's like what the term might be. Cool. We produce X amount of copies during that 5-year period. I own one. Becky owns one, but you don't, because you streamed it. Now the streaming rights are done. Now it's not on Amazon or Shudder. You want to watch the movie? You can't, but Becky and I can. That's the argument, that streaming isn't around forever. Physical media is important. And then if you want good quality, that's where it is. It's like, I always laugh, and I don't make any comments on Twitter just because it starts discourse and it just creates arguments, but it's the truth. It's like, when these streaming ads and HBO Max and Vudu is like 4K UHD. No, it's not. It's not 4K UHD. It's 4K UHD compressed. There's a reason why your TV has to be super loud, where you have to crank it up to 70 just to hear it. You put a Blu-ray in, you don't have to turn it up that loud. And that's the thing. The streaming is a diminishing quality of the actual product. As much work goes into this as the filmmakers created, with sound design and framing and colors. Everything's decreased when you put it on streaming. I've watched movies stream. I have no problem with streaming. I watch movies streaming all the time. But if I have an opportunity to buy something and watch it in its full capacity and glory, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to rent something 4K UHD. I'm going to buy the 4K UHD. And if you get into a situation where I don't notice the difference, as the person saying, well, then that's no harm, no foul. I enjoy the movie, watch the movie, watch movies, watch them on your phone, watch them on your laptop. I do not have a preference on that. I do not care how you watch movies, as long as you're watching a movie. I have nothing to say about that. But if you want to come over and see the difference on what a streaming on my Roku looks like versus the Blu-ray, I can show you, and you will notice the difference. And it all takes the proper setup too. Not everybody has, thousands of dollars to put in a home theater system. That's fine. Watch it on your iPad. I do not have a problem. But again, if you want to have that full experience, then maybe it's something you should think about. And it's cool if you can afford it. And it's really nice. I never forget, my buddy came over, he's like, I've never actually seen Predator. He's like, I'm just going to watch it at home. I'm like, no. Don't watch it at home. Because I know he has got like just a simple, like flat screen TCL, good TV, but it's internal speakers on it. I'm like, no. Come over. Watch it at my place on 4K UHD. And let me show you what this thing can do. And he was like, holy shit. He's like, you're fucking right. And he's not a physical media guy. He doesn't even own a movie. And he was like, that really is quite the experience. I was like, yeah, I know, man. It's like colors top. The sound is like bombastic. That's what a movie's about. It's about recreating that theater experience. because, you sit there in the dark, you have bright lights pointing at your face. You're just looking, you're probably smiling. You don't even notice it. The sound's going off. You're just having a great time. Recreating that at home is special. It's not about owning the product. Part of it is, but it's also about trying to replicate an experience that can't be replicated through watching it on your phone or, your iPad or just streaming it from your television. Again, nothing wrong with that. I watch movies like that all the time. I have to watch movies on my own computer sometimes. It's fine. But there is a difference if you can actually have that Blu-ray materialize in your hand and experience that way. In whatever format comes out next. I think it's important because, again, that stuff's not going to disappear, and I remember a time, people have it way too easy now. That's the other thing. So I come, and you all too, come from a time where it wasn't easy. We didn't have streaming services. People are like, oh, I'll just get on Vudu and rent it. I'll go on Shudder and watch it. Oh, it's streaming. Let's watch it on Amazon Prime. I remember a time, and, I always bring this up. Everybody knows Return of the Living Dead. Incredibly popular movie. I can watch it just now. I can turn on my television, go to a streaming service. I can find probably 3 or places that stream it. I have a Blu-ray in the other room. I can buy it off Amazon. When I was younger, that was a rare movie to find. You couldn't find Return of the Living Dead. It was scarce. Same with Monster Squad. You couldn't find those movies, and they were popular. And with me coming from that time, I want something because it's going to disappear again. Streaming services aren't going to be around. Licensing, and I'm sorry, streaming services probably always be around. But if movies aren't getting watched on these streaming services and these companies aren't making money for putting this movie on the service, they're just going to yank it because it's not making any money. And when that happens, you don't have the movie anymore. And that's why it's important for physical media. Buy your favorite movies so you always have them, because even your favorite movie might not be streaming. Shit. During Halloween, October, if you want to watch Halloween, try to find it sometime. Watch what happens. You can't. You have to buy it like on iTunes for like $20. It's weird. One of the most well-known horror films. You can't find streaming on Shudder, Amazon Prime. You literally have to buy it on iTunes, and that's the only service sometimes. And I haven't checked recently, but for a good 2-3 years, that's how it was. And that was always my argument. You cannot watch Halloween. The movie exists. You love it, but you can't watch it unless you buy it on iTunes or you have a digital or a physical copy. It's crazy, and that's how a lot of these movies will be. If Halloween's like that, why isn't everything else? And the thing is that, again, people think that streaming services have it all because you're fed what the algorithm says, and that's fine. I mean, you're still watching movies. That's the important part. But just because Netflix has 500 movies doesn't mean that's the only 500 movies that exist. There's hundreds of thousands of movies, and you're only being fed what they want you to see, along with any streaming service. You're only being fed what the algorithm says that they should try to license, what they should get. And if you just focus on that, then you're missing a whole world of movies. And that's why physical media is cool, because a lot of stuff that's on disc isn't streaming, licensing is different or whatnot. So that's why I think it's important.
Not a religious man, but amen.
I was going to say, I'm really jealous of your friend that got to watch Predator in that format. Because the first time I saw it was on VHS.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the thing is and that's the cool thing, especially with 4K UHD format now. I'm really, really into that. Because when VHS was around, that's how I watched everything. The DVD came out, and that was a revelation. The Blu-ray came out, that was a revelation. Not so much the Blu-ray of Predator, because it had too much DNR and it was shitty. And it took a while for another good piece of Predator come out. And so when it came out in 4K UHD, they obviously did a new scan of it and restored the film to that capacity for that format. And sometimes and that's how it's been so far with, a 4K UHD is done properly with the correct way to actually do 4K and not skip out. It's like watching movies for the first time again. It really is. I just watched Beverly Hills Cop. I haven't seen Beverly Hills Cop in probably 20 years. And, I watched it with my kid, and oh my God, I just had a wonderful, beautiful time. I watched E.T. on Christmas Day. I had the 4K UHD of that. Just sat there and cried. It was such a beautiful movie. And just watching it in that format and the clarity and the sound was just like a religious experience. And, sometimes people can't get that, and that's fine. And there's maybe people don't want that. And I'm not here to judge, but that's what I get. And, I understand, I see and I feel what I experience. And, sometimes I want others to share that, because maybe they don't know what they're missing.
With you.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, you are truly preaching to the choir, to use another religious euphemism here.
And it's odd because you have these major companies that could just dump stuff, but they're actually taking the time and doing these restorations properly. But it's weird. Again, most of the good 4K UHD movies are the older movies when they're doing all the work. And this new stuff is shot in 4K. But it's been reduced to 2K for Blu-ray. Then they upscale it and put it on a 4K UHD. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? This should be easy. But the ones that are shot on film go on the hard route. But I don't know. I'm just thankful that some of this stuff exists on 4K UHD and it looks good. Because again, with me, I've seen Back to the Future a lot when I was younger. But when I put on the 4K UHD, I literally felt like I was watching the movie for the first time again. And that's the experience that I want when I'm watching this stuff, especially watch it with my kid. Because it's a lot of fun to watch them watch this movie in this impeccable quality. That's the closest that we could possibly get to the theater experience, So anyways.
That concludes the interview proper part of this. And we appreciate all those answers and details about not just your job, but, the fight for constant film preservation and restoration, and all of it is worthy. And again, you're talking to people who are very much on board with what you do. And as Becky said, envious of it even. And we will move now into the Rapid Fire 15, which is our own little questionnaire in the James Lipton vein, but we kind of try to tailor it toward what we've learned about you so far and what we might know about you. Bit of a genre bend, especially with the kind of field you're in. So we will jump into it if you're good. Again, just first thing that comes to mind. Don't worry, don't sweat any of it too much.
No, totally. I don't believe in shaming people for what they like. So
exactly.
Yes,
I don't get shamed for.
There's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. Get out of here.
No, not at all.
All right. First off, what movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Ooh, nobody's ever said that before, and I love that movie. Okay. What is your favorite horror movie franchise?
Halloween, because of Halloween 2.
Nice.
That's interesting. We never get that answer. Everybody goes, I love Halloween 1 or 2, but they like the franchise as a whole is such a mess that they usually go with something else. But that's good that we finally got that answer. I know Becky is fond of it as well.
Oh, yeah. No, I love Halloween 2 so much.
How about your favorite Universal monster movie?
Dracula's Daughter, by far.
Second time we've gotten that answer. I think BJ said that as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
What is your favorite horror movie subgenre?
Ooh. I'll do like subgenre, and this is a little maybe off, is that I'm super biased. Okay, two things. One, if there's a cult involved, I'm always on board. It's always a great movie, no matter what it is. It makes bad movies good when there's a cult. But one of my favorite things is that when you have bad guys and you have good guys, but then you have something that an obstacle they have to overcome, and they have to come together in order to defeat it. Oh my God, I fucking love that. And of course, one of my favorite movies of Class 1999 is my Bible. And you have the Blackhearts and Razorheads that try to kill each other. But then when there's killer teachers that are involved, they have to join gang forces and then kill the teachers. Like, I love like camaraderie like that, to where they have to overcome another obstacle. Yeah,
or From Dusk Till Dawn, like you said at the start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How about, what is your favorite trauma movie?
I don't like trauma.
That was your question.
I didn't know that. I was just trying to pick something that we've never asked before, and I was like, I bet you Brad's seen a bunch, but
so trauma produced movies I'm not a huge fan of, but I do like the stuff they acquire. And my favorite acquired trauma movie is a drama action movie called Fresh Kill.
There you go. You still have an answer with the label.
Right, what is your favorite John Carpenter movie?
Assault on Precinct 13 by far.
Nice. I don't think we've had that answer yet from folks.
Nope.
What is your all-time favorite HBO original movie, and why is it the Mario Van Peebles werewolf action flick Full Eclipse?
So I love Full Eclipse because I liked X-Men at the time, and it feels like an X-Men movie, but with werewolves. And the cinematography is great. The action sequences are phenomenal. There's also this really sexy Mario Van Peebles sex scene in it, but it has a good villain, and I love how he becomes part of the werewolf clan, but then he has to fight the werewolf clan, which I really love. But it's also like a cop movie. It's like Lethal Weapon meets werewolves with X-Men. It's crazy.
Becky, have you've seen this film or no?
No, I don't think so. Like there's some, it's familiar to me and I don't know if I saw it because I was 6 when it came out, but
in researching Mr. Henderson here, I saw his, he letterboxed the 1000 favorites and I saw that and was like, oh, this guy's all right. Cause I preach about this movie often. Aaron gives me grief about how much I was a fan of it as a kid. I love that you said the Mario Van Peebles sex scene, not the Patsy Kensit sex scene.
Oh, I
had her moment there in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well,
she
he
was
is the MVP. So.
Yeah, she is. Oh, I got an MVP, and that's nice. But yeah, she's beautiful. But I mean, let's face it, Mario Van Peebles was the star of that movie.
No, you're not wrong. He wasn't a bad looking guy in his day. He may still be. I haven't seen him lately.
Yeah, and Bruce is it Bruce Davidson? Is it
Payne?
Bruce Payne, that's right.
Yeah.
He's a great villain too.
Yeah, he was. Didn't he replace the Warlock in part 3?
Yeah, Warlock 3. Yeah.
So Becky, if you can remember what the Warlock looked like, he kind of looked exactly like that guy. Showed up as the
Julian
Warlock in the third movie. But yeah, Full Eclipse. I saw that and I was like, oh man, this guy's got a lot of similar reference points as me. So we knew he'd be all right.
All right, give us your best horror double feature. Like if you were to program, sky's the limit.
The Terminator and Class of 1999.
Oh,
I dig that. That's a good one.
Yeah. Terminator and Class of 1999 because they're both sci-fi movies, but they're horror movies at the same time. And I still consider Terminator a slasher film. So
we should add The Guest on and make it a triple feature.
Yeah, The Guest would be a good addition to that too.
What is your all-time favorite theater or movie-going experience? Like, is there a memorable screening or a premiere that sticks out in your mind?
There's many, but I'm going to choose, circling back to Terminator here. I went to, my daughter became obsessed with movies mainly because I was obsessed. So she really loves them too. And, we had this great moment as kind of a daddy-daughter date that we went to go see when Terminator had its anniversary, but it was in 3D. And I was like, this seems kind of fun, in a way. I don't really think 3D is great, but we're going to go see it. We're the only ones in the theater. We traveled 30, 45 minutes to go see it. And, neither of us are 3D fans. And the 3D conversion on this movie was amazing. I was like, what the fuck is happening? 3D sucks, but this is so well done. And it was just her and myself. And we had this great time, had snacks and watched T2 and the sound was incredible. And it was just unbelievable. And I didn't even realize I was watching 3D. It just felt like I was watching the movie for the first time again. And that was one of my Terminator 2 is my earliest memory of going to the theater with my mother because we didn't really have theaters where we lived. And I'll never forget seeing the big T800, outside and the big skull. And they had the big standees. And it was this huge premiere that my mom took me to. Not like a premiere in like Hollywood, it was just like in town. But of course, during that summer, everything was T2. So I got to kind of relive that a little bit. And so that was my fondest experience. I guess if I pick something like as a festival, when we saw Your Next at Fantastic Fest, and this is 3 years before it actually came out, we saw this one-time screening of Your Next at midnight. And it was just really fun because the audience was really, really into it. Simon Barrett and AJ Bowen were there, and they just did a great, funny-ass Q&A. Sharni Vincent was there too, just the cast and crew, Barbara Crampton. It was just this really wonderful experience. And it was also cool because it was so exclusive. There was only one screening at midnight. And then it was even more special because the movie got, in limbo with the company it was, and then it didn't come out for another 2 years. So that was a really fun experience. And then obviously rubbing in people's faces that we got to see it so early and everything.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it from people that went to Fantastic Fest and then having to wait forever. Well, what seemed like forever, obviously, first world problem.
Oh, what? Sure. Yeah. It was at least a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was there opening night because I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. All right, totally different topic. What is your favorite video game of all time?
Gears of War. because I like monsters. I like End of the World, but it's the only game I ever played that's incredibly well written. And that's as far as the dialogue is concerned and the banter of the characters. Each character, like Coltrane, Baird, Marcus, Dom, they're all really well crafted in their own sense. They have really cool backstories. It's this camaraderie of like misfits that are super ultimate badasses. And, just the shit that they say between one another. The overall story is kind of cool of Gears, but I really, really love just them talking. Yeah. Completely different reason why I probably like the video game, but it's still a cool game in general too. But it's just, I don't know. I felt when I watched it, I was like, I want to write the Gears of War movie. That's how I kind of felt.
Yeah. I hear you though, because I think VO performances and dialogue for years were the worst parts about any story-based, heavy narrative video game. Like it's gotten better over time, but they used to be so awful.
Right. Yeah. They're really bad. And it's just like Gears of War that they really took a movie cinematic approach to it, and which I really liked.
Sort of back into film and sort of on topic of action and martial arts and stuff. Which 80s, 90s action movie martial artist are you taking in a fight? Michael Dudikoff, Cynthia Rothrock, or Don the Dragon Wilson?
Who would win?
Yeah, whether it's a shoot fight or a movie fight. Cynthia Rothrock. I thought you might say that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the most skilled and, most awards and more decorated martial artists of all time.
I feel like I need to show my daughter Gwen, like just do a big marathon, with a lot of her films. Because
yeah, she
would find her a total badass.
Yeah, she's literally like, that's the thing. And, it's funny because talking to Don, he's like, Cynthia's like the real fucking deal. He's like, it's no joke. We all are martial artists and we're all good. But, again, they kind of have like a distaste for people like Van Damme and Seagal. Like they're good martial artists. I mean, they know what they're doing. But as far as like winning a fight, like Rothrock would just annihilate everybody because she's that good. So
awesome.
I was a big Dolph Lundgren mark as a kid. I was even mad when he lost to Universal Soldier. I'm like, no, man, in real life, he'd wreck Van Damme. He was a kickboxing champion multi-time.
Yeah. Like Van Damme's like really terrible at everything. Acting and he splits and he can do a high kick. But other than that,
dance too, if you see the background of breaking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Don't break my heart. I love Van Damme. I'm just a fan from childhood. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Like just in general?
Yeah, anything.
It's a problem myself. I believe I have a thing called misophonia. I think it's how you pronounce it. And it's the hatred of sounds. So if anything small is happening, like clicking, tapping, little noises with your mouth, and sometimes it's things that people can't help, I get overly angry at it. So it's my own personal thing. But if I had to pick something that, it's not my fault, I would say, it's got to be like online discourse where you say, like, for example, it just happened today is that I shared this Mortal Kombat story that I knew of. And it was just like the amount of people that said, oh, I call bullshit. Not on the fact that, they call bullshit that the company's backing out that, oh, we're going to say this because our movie's bad. It was like, no, that's not what happened. Or, yeah, I don't believe believe you. Like in the sense of like, I'm wrong or making it up for trying to have some type of quote unquote viral tweet or 15 minutes of fame. It's like, dude, you're not even in the industry. What the fuck are you doing? Like, don't come at me when I've done like the research and I've spoken to people and, it's mostly people that don't follow you. So why are you going to jump into somebody's life that you don't know? Like, bro, I've been doing this forever. Like I have a bunch of crazy information and you go to share it just to, have a good time or, of course, Mortal Kombat's in the news again. So let's celebrate, and it's just like, people always, I guess people sticking in their nose when they don't know the full story, talk to me about it. Ask me. Don't just assume that I'm just making something up or, oh, I didn't hear about that. So that can't be true. That type of thing. So yeah, gatekeeping in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
How about what is Brad Henderson's walk-up music? Like if you're coming out for your TED Talk to tell us about Vinegar Syndrome and film preservation, what's your entrance theme?
Well, Really interesting. What's that? Wolf Like Me, Local H, maybe? I don't know. Maybe that. I like Local H a lot.
Local H is good.
Nice. So if you win the lotto, what would be your first big splurge? Like not something like, donating to charity, which is awesome, or like, paying for your kid's college or something. I don't know. But like something that's like a true splurge for yourself.
This was the Steve Martin SNL bit. If you could have one wish, but if you could have your fifth wish, what would you splurge on?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I would produce my own movies. I would be selfish in that sense and produce the stuff that I couldn't have done. The scripts materialize into a feature. And then hopefully
it would be the same 100%.
Yeah, I would just do that and then, produce movies. And then, if we're talking, how many are we talking about here? We're talking about like, mega millions where it's like 500 million. Then I would help friends make their features. I'd become a producer. I have my own company, produce my own movies, hire people to direct them, and then, make a name for myself.
Yeah, I think that'd be our answer, whether, like you said, it was 500,000 or 500 million.
Yeah.
Some variation on that. Just change the scale a little bit.
And finally, this may be tricky because you're in Florida where people have acted like the pandemic never happened. But what would be the one thing you would do as soon as all social distancing, quarantining, and all that is behind us, vaccinations are in, that you've not been able to do maybe in the past year? What's the first thing you're doing post restrictions world?
Going to the first film festival that I can that I know my friends are at.
It's the most common answer we've gotten, and we very much agree.
Yeah, going to the movies, going to a film festival, some variation on that, right?
Yeah, well, fuck going to. I don't care about going to the movies because I hate. You can't really go to a movie and have a good time in Polk County because everybody's talking and running around, being on phones. So I really don't miss. That's the thing is like it's so funny because I do like the theater experience, but if someone said you can't go to the theater anymore, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. I'll just watch them at home because it's a way better experience for me. I don't live in a town where we have draft house that enforces rules or respectful audience and
Orlando's getting one though, so it's not too far from you.
Yeah, they've been saying that for.
Oh, it took 4 years in LA, so just trust me, it'll happen eventually. We waited 4 years for it to be open less than a year, and then the pandemic shut it back down. The other good thing is you're also, you're what, 40 something miles either direction to the Enziana Tampa Theater, where you might see a good revival screening or something like that, where the audiences might take it a lot more seriously. Yeah, there's the Regal down the road.
Yeah, there's a lot of old people there, and working at the Florida Film Festival because I did, on top of everything else, there's many things I didn't mention tonight, but I was a programmer for various festivals, and Florida Film Festival was one. And I'll never forget because sometimes you'd go to movies. Of course, if you even program a festival, there's movies you haven't seen there. So I would go, and I'll never forget. I was in this documentary. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about this guy who had a mail order bride or something. And part of the thing is he goes to the grocery store. And then these two people behind me started talking about how they had to go to the grocery store after the movie. And they started talking about sales and stuff. And I turned around, I was like, what the fuck are you two doing? Like, shut the fuck up. Like, who cares? And I realized that every time I went to something, there was somebody talking. I'll never forget the funniest moment. And my girlfriend was with me. We went to the Enzion to see God Bless America. And shit you not, the scene where they answer the phone in the theater and he shoots her. There was somebody that answered their fucking phone in the theater during that fucking scene. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, this is the answer. Like, this shit does happen. And, so I honestly, like, I'm not going to go to the NZN to hear old people talk. But, theater experience other than festivals have been kind of ruined for me, and honestly, and this is weird. The only time that I think I have a good time at the theater are the movies that I don't like or don't care to see. Like, for any Marvel movie or any Star Wars movie. I love going opening night to a Star Wars movie. I know that I'm not probably going to like it because it's not my bag, but my God, the audience is fun. And they shut up and they cheer and they have a great time. And that's what I love. So I love that, so I'll go to opening night on big movies, but I won't see a horror film for the life of me around here just because everybody will talk. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And, part of me is hoping that just this whole experience of the pandemic will movie theaters will have to change a bit to survive, and that, maybe this is wishful thinking, that they'll have to create a better experience for people because you'll have much less like mass market sort of, Regals and AMC's around every corner. Like I think a lot of them will have to close down, and you'll maybe have the movie theater be a much more, eventized experience, just because people are now accustomed to doing everything at home. So,
yeah, I'm hoping that when, things quote unquote get back to normal, like this theater at home will keep the people that don't care about the movie stay at home because it's cheaper for them. Exactly. And the people that really like the experience will be the ones that continue. So it's going to be kind of a treat, maybe for a little while at least. I'm hoping that might be the case, because honestly, like, I love this theater from home shit, because I got a home theater. I have, these hand-built speakers. I have, a great system. I spent money on what I have, and watching a movie in my dark theater room is equivalent to me going to the theater. That's how I look at it. And I love it. And yeah, I mean, I do miss the theater in a sense, but I've recreated that experience at home. And if it's going to be ruined, maybe it's because I'm crazy. Maybe it's because I'm a snob. But when I sit and watch a movie, I'm there to watch the movie. I'm not there to hear anything else. I don't want to hear anything else. I'm there to immerse myself into this movie, no matter what it is. I don't give a shit if it's a Pixar movie. I don't care if it's a mindless action movie. I don't care if it's 3 billboards in Ebbing, Missouri. I want to watch the movie in this way to where I don't hear anything. And I'm in the movie. I live the movie. That's how I watch movies. So if I hear noises in the background, kids running around, cell phones going off, that takes you part. You realize you're in reality. That's how I look at it. And that's how I feel. I might be crazy, but I feel like I'm jerked out of this room, and then I slowly have to go back in. And when that happens consistently, when you're watching a movie with people talking and whatnot, I just don't feel like I had the same experience. Like I'm distracted a little bit. So when I watch a movie, I take my phone, unless I've maybe seen the movie before. Like if I'm watching a movie for like the 5th time, my phone goes off. I'll check it probably. But for the most part, if I watch a movie for the first time, my phone is face down and away from me. And I do the same thing with my kid, no phone in the theater, because we're here to watch a movie. If it's important, they'll call multiple times and leave a message. But the most important people in your life right now are in this room. So let's just focus on that. And let's appreciate what because that's the other thing is that, filmmakers and love for film, a lot of work goes into this stuff. How would you feel if you made something and someone was on their phone when you watched it, or, you wrote something and they put it down and be like, oh, I'll read it later. No, that's why they call it page turners for a book. You immerse yourself in your book. You have quiet time. You just keep reading, until you get tired and then you put it away. I forget what the question was. I'm sorry, but I
think we're just talking at this point.
Yeah.
No, but I don't think you're crazy. I totally get that. And I think especially now when there are so many screens around us all the time, it's people have kind of lost some of the sanctity of the movies a bit, and you got to try and preserve it. And I think you're right. Like you got to think about like, hey, even if you're not a filmmaker or an artist yourself, you can at least respect and think about like, hey, if I were giving a presentation at work, how would I feel if like my boss was not even paying attention and they were on their phone the whole time? And it's like, oh,
right.
And they're asking me questions because they didn't hear what I said.
Yeah. What do you go to a fucking museum and read the news? No, you stand there and you embrace and take in the art. And you just got a new house and you have a theater. So you're going to have that awesome experience. And here's the thing is we have a TV in our living room, but I'm not going to watch a movie in there. I come to the theater and I have my own room. I'm in it right now. I got movie posters all over the walls, and I have this small, like comfy little room with this nice, relaxing couch, total darkness. And I flip on a movie and then I go into the house. That's how I look at it. Like I'm in a different space.
Yep.
And that's how I like it to feel. So.
Yeah. I like it to be intentional. I am intentionally watching this movie. It's not on in the background while I'm doing other things.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure there's room for that. Like you said, for movies that are comfort watches that you've seen a billion times or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If I got to, working or something, I got to write a bunch of emails and go to the living room, put on, Jason Lives. I've seen it 300 times in my life. I can have it on the background. I know exactly word for word. I know what's happening, but obviously I don't need to pay attention. I don't need to sit and watch it. And that's what that room is for. And that's, that purpose. But if it's something I'm going to watch for the first time, no, I try my best. Sometimes you have your phone and you see it pop up and you got to check something. It happens. I'm not going to say every movie I've ever watched for the first time I've never checked something, but I make an effort to do that.
Speaking of notifications and stuff, so if people want to find you online and follow you on Twitter or Instagram, whatever social media, like what are your handles? Where would you prefer to direct people?
Yeah, I'm mainly just on Twitter these days at Brad F. Henderson. I do have an Instagram, but you're just going to see pictures of dogs like every other month that I post. And I do have Facebook, and I just like and share Vinegar Syndrome stuff. I never, ever, ever post anything. I just use it to track forums and groups that talk about Vinegar Syndrome stuff. But Twitter is the only thing I use on my personal usage. But again, I'm only really going to talk about movies all the time. Every once in a while, I'll say something political, but it's usually something to piss off the people that don't like what I like. But yeah, mostly just talking about movies and talking about rare stuff and recommending stuff. And, that's it.
And there's a newsletter too for Vinegar Syndrome, right? That people can sign up if they want to, hear about sales and things like that.
You can go to our website, vinegarsyndrome.com. You can sign up for the newsletter, which is nice because we also give, sometimes soft announcements in that. We also sometimes hint at things, and, the answer sometimes in the email. It's just sometimes people just never get it. And it's funny because sometimes they're really obvious. I'll never forget, we had for our Black Friday sale, we had kind of a buying guide. And we literally had in gold letters on one of the things that if you screw up, we put "Don't panic," and no one got it. It's it says "Don't panic" right there, and it's that's a total fucking hint. But no one picked it up until afterwards. But I think people kind of knew we were going to be doing "Don't Panic" anyway because of the 2 other Galindo films that we released. But it was still there. So but yeah, you follow us there. We announce titles every month. We have sometimes between 3 and 5 titles, then sometimes box sets with even 3-4 movies in there. This next month is going to be pretty exciting. One of my favorite 90s movies is being released. Something that I from day one when I was hired, I went after was Vincent Roberts' The Fear. So the movie is also uncut for the very first time in HD, which the only version that you could see uncut was on VHS. When it hit DVD, it was brutally butchered because it was a Christian company that released it, and they cut out all the nudity and language, which is weird. So yeah, The Fear is going to be the first time. Then I also produce a 45-50 minutes behind the scenes kind of doc with cast and crew, and I moderated 2 commentaries on that, one with producer Greg H. Sims and then one with Vincent Robert himself. And we also have so we're doing Hitcher in the Dark was the other one that we announced it, but that was one of the newer titles. But I'm definitely most excited about The Fear because I think it's one of those quintessential films for the 90s that everybody should know from the video store, at least from seeing the cover, not so much seeing the movie. But it's got an iconic cover. It was everywhere in stores, so very excited about that because I think it's one of those films that needs to be seen again because I think it was kind of got shit on because people didn't really know what it was. I know that some people view it as a slasher film. Some people view it as psychological horror. I think it's one of those movies that's a little before its time. And I think now might be the time to see it because we have these, Hereditary and Midsommar. We have these kind of more dramatic movies that have horror elements. I think The Fear kind of falls into that category. Not saying it's as good as those movies or whatever. Don't go and think you're going to see something about a cult. But I think it's more psychological, thriller than it is a slasher horror film.
All right. And again, vinegarsyndrome.com. We think you guys have been doing amazing work. Again, I picked up several recently. Love that you guys did the 4K works to Taming the T-Rex, and Beastmaster was just a beautiful set. Like I said, I can't wait to break into all the special features on that. Some other ones we mentioned on the show, even in recent weeks, like Dial Code Santa Claus. I think Matt Donato had gave a shout out to. And again, Becky's deep cuts often hail from
the Severed Arm was
that's true.
Yep.
No, it's a movie that molded me.
So yeah, we appreciate the time and the answers, and again, keep up the great work, and thanks for being on with us, Brad.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Anytime.
All right, stay safe and enjoy the movies at home.
Take care.